Officer down. Shots fired at First National Bank. All units respond. Repeat. Officer down. The police scanner's frantic cry ripped through the still morning of Milbrook, Ohio. Forks clattered, coffee sloshed, and the hum of conversation inside Rosie's diner froze mid-sentence. At the back sink, Jake Mitchell stopped scrubbing plates. His knuckles whitened on the sponge. Beside the counter, a small voice broke the silence. "Daddy, what's happening?" 9-year-old Emma Mitchell clutched her mother's silver watch so tightly it pressed an imprint into her palm. Her wide eyes reflected the neon glow of the diner sign and something heavier, fear. Jake's gaze shifted instinctively toward the window. He had lived long enough with danger to recognize the way it crept into a room, silent and certain, like a storm before the thunder. He lowered his voice. "Stay put, Em. Don't move until I say so." Milbrook wasn't just a town. It was a jury that never adjourned. Population 12,000, give or take, with twice as many roomers as residents. To them, Jake wasn't just a man rinsing dishes for $8 an hour. He was a felon, an ex-convict, a shadow that didn't belong in the light. For years behind bars for aggravated assault. For years of whispered judgments, paper headlines, and Sunday church gossip that never let him go. What most of Milbrook never cared to hear was why. Jake had once been a professional bodyguard, sworn to protect lives most people only read about. One night, he stopped a stalker from breaking into a client's home. The intruder ended up in the hospital with a fractured skull. The DA called it excessive force. The jury called it assault. Jake called it doing his damn job. That conviction stripped him of everything. His career, his reputation, his freedom. Except for Sarah. Sarah Mitchell had stayed. She visited through glass, whispered through static-laced phones, and reminded him that a man's worth wasn't in the verdict of strangers. But Sarah was gone now. A construction accident. A company corner-cutting safety protocols. A news report that reduced a woman's life to 3 minutes of footage and a line about corporate negligence. And so Jake stood in a diner, scraping plates, raising his daughter in a $38 a night motel room, holding himself together with sheer will because Emma needed at least one parent left in the world. Rosie's diner was Milbrook's crossroads. Truckers, teachers, cops, and high school dropouts all passed through the red vinyl booths. Conversations about high school football mixed with whispers about who got arrested last weekend. It was also where Jake found something like belonging. Pete Garrison, the owner, was a barrel-chested man with salt and pepper hair and a voice that could shake the grill. Pete had known Jake before the trial. He didn't buy into gossip. To him, Jake was a worker who showed up on time, never stole a dime, and wiped down counters until they gleamed. Still, Pete's kindness couldn't drown out the stares. Every shift, Jake felt them. The sideways glances from men in hunting caps, the tight smiles from church ladies ordering blueberry pie. Emma noticed too. Kids were cruel, but adults with hushed voices and pointed fingers were worse. One afternoon, as Jake refilled ketchup bottles, Emma leaned close. "Why do they look at us like that?" Jake bent down, meeting her eyes. "Because people remember the worst parts of a story, not the whole of it. And sometimes they just don't know better." She nodded slowly, but her grip on the watch tightened. The watch was silver, scratched at the edges, its leather strap cracked with years of wear. To Emma, it was more than jewelry, it was a lifeline. Jake often caught her tracing the numbers with her fingertip, as if touching them could bring Sarah back. At night, in their cramped motel room at the Sunset Inn, Jake would hear Emma whisper to it, "Good night, Mommy." And then, when she thought he was asleep, he'd hear her soft sobs muffled against the pillow. Jake never stopped those cries. He knew grief needed space to breathe, but each one cut deeper than prison bars ever had. That morning at Rosie's diner, the police scanner still echoed. "Officer down. Shots fired at First National Bank." Jake's eyes narrowed. The old instincts were awake now. Muscle memory from years of watching shadows, reading danger before it struck. His body was a map of scars reminding him that safety was never guaranteed. Pete grunted from behind the counter. Hell's breaking loose out there. Bank's 3 blocks away. Coleman's gonna be on this one for sure. The name hit Jake like a slap. 15 years on the force. Decorated. Respected. And Jake's personal tormentor. Coleman didn't just dislike Jake. He made it his mission to remind the town of who Jake had been. At the hardware store, at the grocery line, even outside Emma's school. Always the same sneer, the same words. Once a criminal, always a criminal. Jake didn't flinch. Not outwardly. But inside, the rage brewed hot enough to scorch. Still, for Emma's sake, he learned to swallow it whole. Back in the diner, Emma tugged his sleeve. "Daddy, will they be okay?" The police officer. Jake hesitated. He looked at her small face, her mother's freckles, her stubborn chin. "I don't know, Em. But I know this. Fear makes people dangerous. And fear is in the air right now." She didn't fully understand, but she nodded anyway. Through the diner window, sirens wailed down Main Street. Blue and red lights reflected against the glass like ghosts of choices yet to be made. Jake's chest tightened. He knew what those sounds meant. Trouble. Decisions. The kind of moments that split a man's life into before and after. And though he didn't know it yet, that bank robbery would drag him back into a world he thought he'd left behind. Jake stood frozen, Emma at his side, as the sirens screamed past. The diner's hum picked back up, but Jake's mind was already elsewhere. The storm was coming.
"Tell me, Mitchell, how long before you screw up again? A week? A month? People like you don't change." The words dropped like stones in the quiet of Milbrook hardware. The clink of nails and paper bags, the squeak of a shopping cart, and then silence. Jake Mitchell froze in the aisle, a hammer in his hand. He didn't have to turn. He knew the voice. Officer Ryan Coleman. Coleman stood at the end of the aisle, broad-shouldered in his navy blue uniform, a badge gleaming under fluorescent lights. His jaw was clenched, his eyes sharp with disdain. Shoppers posed. The hardware store was small enough that everyone could hear. "I'm just here to buy a tool, Coleman," Jake said evenly, setting the hammer back. "Yeah? Tools for what? Breaking into cars? Or maybe busting heads like last time?" Laughter snickered from somewhere behind the paint cans. Jake didn't look. He didn't need to know who it was. Coleman stepped closer, his boots clicking against the linoleum. "You think Milbrook forgot? You think a prison stint makes you a saint? Nah. Once a criminal, always a criminal." Jake's jaw tightened, but he forced his voice low, calm. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've lost." Coleman's eyes narrowed. "I know enough. And I'll be watching. Don't give me a reason, Mitchell, or I'll make sure that little girl of yours grows up in foster care." A beat of silence. The words hung heavier than handcuffs. Jake didn't react, not visibly. But inside, something snapped cold. He wanted to lash out, to remind Coleman that not every man with a record was dangerous. But Emma's face rose in his mind, steadying him. So he stayed still. Behind Coleman's eyes, Ryan Coleman wasn't born cruel. 15 years on the Milbrook Police Department had hardened him. He wore his badge like armor, but the cracks showed. His marriage was a battlefield. Years of trying, of failed fertility treatments, had left him bitter. The house he returned to each night was silent, too silent. The bottle filled the gaps. Whiskey after shift. Beer before bed. A ritual that dulled the ache but sharpened his temper. And men like Jake Mitchell, ex-cons trying to reintegrate, became his targets. To Coleman, Jake was a mirror of failure, a man who had lost, yet somehow still had a child, still had purpose. It gnawed at him. Back at Rosie's diner, Jake tried to shake it off. The morning rush was thinning. Coffee cups clinked. Bacon sizzled. Pete Garrison leaned on the counter, eyeing Jake. "Coleman gave you hell again, didn't he?" Jake shrugged, drying his hands on a towel. "Same song, different verse." Pete's brow furrowed. "That man's drowning in his own demons. Don't you let him pull you under too." Jake managed a faint smile. Pete had always been more than an employer. He was a steadying force, a man who believed people could change. Appreciate it, Pete. Just trying to keep my head down. Pete clapped him on the shoulder. Head down's fine. But don't forget, your girl needs to see you stand tall, too. That night at the motel, Emma worked on homework at the small wooden desk while Jake washed dishes in the bathroom sink. She looked up suddenly. Daddy, why does Officer Coleman hate us? Jake froze, the plate slipping slightly in his hand. He doesn't hate you, Em. He just doesn't understand. Sometimes people's pain makes them mean. Like a kid on the playground who gets picked on, he turns around and picks on someone smaller. Emma tilted her head. But he's a grown-up. Jake nodded slowly. Some grown-ups never learn better. Emma thought about that for a moment, then went back to her homework. But the crease in her brow told Jake she wasn't convinced. It was a Thursday morning when Jake walked Emma to Milbrook Elementary. Parents lingered by minivans, chatting about PTA fundraisers and football practice. Jake crouched to kiss Emma's forehead. Go on. I'll see you after class. But before she could step inside, a shadow fell across them, Officer Coleman. Hands on his duty belt, eyes locked on Jake. Morning, Mitchell. Funny seeing you around schools. Makes people nervous. Emma froze, clutching her backpack straps. Jake straightened, his voice low but steady. She's my daughter. I walk her to school like any father would. Coleman leaned closer, his breath heavy with last night's whiskey. Maybe social services should take a closer look at where you're living. Motel rooms aren't exactly child-friendly. Jake's fists curled at his sides. Stay away from my family, Coleman. Coleman smirked. Just doing my job. Protecting the community. And if that means keeping an eye on you, so be it. Emma's small voice cut in. Daddy, let's go inside. Jake swallowed his anger, forced a nod, and took her hand. As they walked past, Coleman's voice followed like a curse. Tick-tock, Mitchell. It's only a matter of time. That night, Jake lay awake in the motel bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling. Coleman's words echoed. Foster care. He thought of Sarah, of her laughter in the kitchen, of how she used to say, Jake, the world breaks everyone, but it's how we carry the cracks that matters. He glanced at Emma, curled against her pillow, Sarah's watch clutched in her small hand. Coleman was circling closer. And Jake knew, eventually, a line would be crossed. But neither of them could predict that the line would be drawn not at a schoolyard or a diner, but at the First National Bank. The storm had only begun. And when gunfire shattered Milbrook's quiet streets, Jake would be forced to make a choice no ex-convict should ever face. You're one bad day away from losing her, Mitchell. Think about that the next time you look at your daughter. The words weren't shouted. They were whispered, hissed between clenched teeth on the front steps of Milbrook Elementary. And they cut deeper than any prison shank ever had. The schoolyard was buzzing, children spilling from buses, parents chatting about bake sales. And in the middle of it, Jake Mitchell stood frozen as Officer Ryan Coleman leaned close, his badge catching the morning sun. Emma's hand gripped Jake's tighter. Her knuckles were white. Why do you keep saying things like that? Jake's voice was low, controlled. He wouldn't give Coleman the satisfaction of seeing him snap. Coleman smirked. Because someone's gotta remind this town who you are. Motel rooms, diner shifts, criminal past. Tell me, Mitchell, what part of that sounds like a stable father? Jake clenched his jaw. His instinct was to strike back, verbally, physically, any way that would shut Coleman up. But Emma's wide eyes anchored him. You don't know a damn thing about me, Jake said, steady as stone. I know enough, Coleman replied. And I've seen the reports. Social Services already has a file. You're a risk, Mitchell. Don't act surprised if one day, Emma's gone. Emma gasped softly, looking up at her father. Jake crouched, shielding her from Coleman's glare. Ignore him, Em. He's just hurting, and he doesn't know how to stop. Coleman's jaw twitched. He wasn't used to Jake's calm. He wanted anger, an outburst, something to write down in a report. But Jake gave him nothing. Still, the damage was done. Emma's trust in her safe little world cracked that morning. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She sat cross-legged on the motel bed, Sarah's watch in her palm, staring at her father. "Daddy, what if they take me away?" Jake froze. He'd been dreading the question. He sat beside her, choosing each word like it weighed 100 pounds. "Emma, nobody's taking you from me. Not now. Not ever. People like Coleman, they use fear to get what they want. But fear doesn't win unless we let it." She tilted her head. "But he's a police officer. Aren't they supposed to help people?" Jake's throat tightened. He wanted to tell her yes. He wanted her to believe in the shield, in the idea that justice was fair. But lying wasn't love. "Most officers do," he said finally. "But some carry so much pain inside, they forget why they wore the badge in the first place." Emma traced the cracked leather strap of the watch. "Like a bully on the playground," she whispered. Jake nodded slowly. "Exactly like that." Meanwhile, across town, Ryan Coleman nursed a glass of whiskey at his kitchen table. His wife, Melissa, had long since given up waiting for him to talk. She watched TV in the bedroom, the glow of sitcom laughter a cruel contrast to the silence between them. Coleman stared at a framed photo on the mantel. Him and Melissa on their wedding day, smiles bright, futures wide open. Now the smiles were gone. The future had narrowed to long nights, empty cribs, and a bottle that was always too close at hand. He hated Jake Mitchell not because of what Jake had done, but because Jake still had someone who looked at him like he mattered. Coleman's own reflection felt emptier by the day. 2 days later, Coleman walked into Rosie's diner. Boots heavy, presence louder than the bell above the door. Conversations faltered. Jake stiffened at the sink, but didn't turn. Pete Garrison, wiping down the counter, raised an eyebrow. "Morning, officer. Coffee?" Coleman ignored him, his gaze locked on Jake. "Dishwashing, huh? Bet you dream about the old days. Guns, glory, broken bones." Jake stayed quiet, rinsing mugs. Coleman leaned on the counter, speaking louder for the room to hear. "Funny, isn't it? A man with his record serving eggs and bacon like he's clean. Folks, don't forget, this guy put someone in the hospital. You think that temper just disappears?" A hush fell. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Pete slammed the rag down. "That's enough, Ryan. He's working. He's providing for his kid. More than I can say for half the folks in this town who sit around judging." Coleman's lip curled. He tossed a crumpled bill on the counter, untouched coffee steaming in front of him. "Tick-tock, Mitchell. One day you'll slip. And I'll be there." He left, the doorbell jangling like an alarm. Pete turned to Jake, voice low. "Don't let him win, son. Men like that feed off the fight." Jake gave a tight nod, but his chest burned. That night, Jake sat at the motel desk, scribbling numbers on scrap paper. Rent, diner wages, overdue bills. The math never added up. Emma stirred in her sleep, clutching Sarah's watch. Jake rubbed his temples. Coleman was pushing harder. The town still whispered. The walls were closing in. And then, distant, faint but undeniable, sirens. Cutting through the quiet Ohio night. Jake froze, listening. Sirens always meant something in Milbrook. Something close. He didn't know it yet, but within hours those sirens would lead him straight into the First National Bank. Into the gunfire. Into Coleman's blood. Into a choice that would rewrite his life. "We didn't come here to kill anyone. Just give us the money and nobody gets hurt." The scream echoed off marble walls inside the First National Bank of Milbrook. Glass doors rattled, papers fluttered from overturned desks. And outside, sirens screamed. Jake stood frozen at the corner of Main and Fifth, Emma clutching his arm. They had been walking home from the diner when the storm broke. Blue and red lights painted the town square. Officers crouched behind squad cars, weapons drawn. Civilians scattered, screaming. And then Jake saw him, Officer Coleman, stumbling behind a cruiser, blood soaking his sleeve. For a moment, time slowed. Coleman, the man who had tormented him for months, was on the ground, clutching his side. His face pale, his eyes wide. Daddy. Emma's voice trembled. He's hurt. Jake's instincts roared awake. Every muscle, every scar, every training drill from his bodyguard years surged to the surface. He turned to Pete Garrison, who had followed them outside from the diner. Stay with her. Don't let her move. Emma grabbed his sleeve. No, Daddy, don't. Jake crouched, gripping her shoulders. His voice was steel, but his eyes were soft. I need you to be brave, Em. Just like Mommy was. I'll be back. Her lip trembled, but she nodded, clutching the watch like a talisman. Jake moved fast, keeping low as he crossed the police line. Shouts rang out. Mitchell! Get back! An officer barked, but Jake didn't stop. He knew hesitation killed. Inside, the air was thick with fear. Two young men stood at the center, AR-style rifles clutched in trembling hands. Their faces were pale, eyes darting like trapped animals. Marcus and Kevin. Barely 20. Sweat dripped down their foreheads. A dozen hostages huddled by the wall, bank tellers, customers, an elderly couple whispering prayers. Jake raised his hands slowly, empty. His voice was calm, steady, the kind of tone he had once used to talk down armed stalkers in dark parking lots. Hey! My name's Jake. I'm unarmed. I just want to talk. Marcus swung his rifle toward him, eyes wild. Back off, man! Don't play hero! Jake didn't flinch. He stepped closer, one deliberate pace at a time. You don't want to shoot me. I can see it in your hands. They're shaking. You're scared. Kevin's lip quivered. He looked younger up close, more boy than man. We didn't want this. We need the money. My mom, she's sick, man. She's dying. We don't have insurance. What were we supposed to do? Jake's chest ached. He saw himself in Kevin, the desperation, the cornered feeling that made men reckless. I get it, Jake said softly. Life kicks hard. Harder than anyone deserves. But this path? It only ends two ways, prison or a body bag. Marcus's finger twitched on the trigger. Shut up! You don't know us! Jake slowly reached into his pocket, not for a weapon, but for a worn photo. He held it up. This is my daughter Emma. She's 9. Her mom's gone. All she has is me. And if I make the wrong choice, she loses everything. Just like your mom would lose you. Kevin's eyes filled with tears. He lowered his rifle an inch. Marcus, maybe we should. No! Marcus barked, panicked. His chest heaved. His fear was sharper, angrier. Jake stepped closer, voice firm now, commanding but not threatening. Look at Coleman out there. He's bleeding out. You shoot one more time, and the cops storm this place. And then none of us walk out alive. A groan sounded near the door. Coleman had dragged himself inside, blood trailing behind him. His face was ashen, his breath ragged. Jake dropped to his side instinctively. Training took over, pressure on the wound, steady voice in Coleman's ear. Stay with me, Ryan. You're not dying in this damn bank. Coleman's eyes flicked open. For the first time, they weren't filled with scorn. They were filled with fear. Why are you helping me? He rasped. Jake met his gaze. Because someone has to. The young gunman watched, frozen, rifles lowering inch by inch. The sight of a man saving another, even an enemy, cracked through their panic. Kevin dropped his rifle with a clatter. His hands shot up. I don't want this anymore, Marcus. I'm done. Marcus stood rigid, torn between pride and terror. His rifle trembled. His eyes darted to Jake. You think prison's better than this? You think they'll give us a second chance? Jake locked eyes with him. I know they will. Because I got mine. And because being alive, seeing your mom again, is better than any headline about a shootout in Milbrook. For a long, breathless moment, the bank was silent. Then, with a shaky exhale, Marcus let the rifle slip from his hands. The sound of it hitting the marble floor was the loudest mercy Milbrook had heard in years. Police swarmed in, shouting commands. The hostages were ushered out. Kevin and Marcus were cuffed, but alive. Jake stayed kneeling by Coleman, pressing down on the wound, refusing to move until paramedics pushed through. As they lifted Coleman onto a stretcher, his hand weakly caught Jake's wrist. "I was wrong about you," he whispered. Jake's throat tightened. "Doesn't matter now. Just fight. Live." Coleman's grip loosened as they wheeled him out. Jake stepped into the night air, sweat dripping down his brow, sirens still wailing. Across the barricade, Emma broke free from Pete's arms and ran to him. She clutched him so tight it hurt. "Daddy, you came back." Jake kissed her hair, his voice rough. "Always." The robbery was over. But its echoes, Coleman's survival, the town's judgment shifting, and the fate of the two boys, would ripple through Milbrook. And for Jake, the hardest part wasn't walking into danger. It was learning what came after. "Funny thing about time," Pete Garrison said, polishing a coffee pot. "6 months ago, you were the town's shadow. Now folks call you a hero." Jake Mitchell leaned on the diner counter, sleeves rolled up, the smell of fresh biscuits filling the air. Upstairs, above Rosie's diner, Emma's laughter echoed through the floorboards. For the first time in years, the sound didn't ache. It healed. Milbrook had a long memory. It never let go of scandal, sin, or Sunday gossip. But it also remembered courage. Word had spread fast. Jake Mitchell, the ex-con, had saved Officer Ryan Coleman's life inside First National Bank. He had walked in unarmed, talked down 2 desperate boys, and kept bloodshed from staining the town square. Now, when he walked down Main Street, the whispers had changed. "That's him. The one who saved Coleman. Can you believe it? The guy's got guts." There were still skeptics, of course. There always would be. But for the first time, Jake wasn't defined by his record. He was defined by his choices. Pete had made him an offer Jake couldn't refuse. "You've given me loyalty, Jake. Time to give you a future. Buy the diner. Pay me off in pieces. No rush. Just keep it running." And so Jake and Emma moved into the small apartment above Rosie's. The sun set and was behind them. The motel nightmares, the peeling wallpaper, the sound of strangers in the hallway at midnight, all gone. Now Emma had her own room. Posters of horses on the wall, books stacked by the bed, Sarah's watch on the nightstand. Each morning, she'd bounce downstairs, slipping behind the counter like she owned the place. "Coffee, Daddy?" she'd joke, pouring him water in a mug. Jake would smile, his heart fuller than any paycheck could buy. Ryan Coleman survived. Barely. The bullet had torn through muscle, grazing an artery. Doctors said another inch, and he'd have been gone. But lying in a hospital bed for weeks gave him more than scars. It gave him clarity. He quit drinking. Cold turkey. The shakes, the sweats, the sleepless nights, he endured them all. Melissa, his wife, stood by him through it. Slowly, painfully, their marriage found new footing. When Coleman finally walked back into Rosie's diner, 6 months sober, Jake was behind the counter. Silence fell. Coleman cleared his throat, words heavy in his mouth. "I owe you everything. And I've been the worst kind of bastard about it. You saved my life, Jake. And I spit on yours. I'm sorry." The diner held its breath. Jake studied him. The old anger flickered, but then he saw the truth. Coleman's shoulders lower, his voice crack, his eyes red from more than whiskey withdrawal. Jake nodded once. "Then do better. That's all I ask." Coleman exhaled, relief washing over him like a tide. Weeks later, Coleman returned with a quiet request. They sat in a booth, untouched coffee cooling between them. "Melissa and we're applying to adopt. The agency will need a character reference. And I can't think of anyone else who'd know what kind of man I'd become." Jake stared at him, stunned. Then he smiled faintly. "Funny. 6 months ago, you were threatening to take my kid away. Now you're asking me to vouch for you." Coleman's laugh was rough, self-deprecating. "Life's got a twisted sense of humor. Jake leaned forward, his voice softer now. Being a parent isn't about big moments. It's about the little ones. Packing lunches. Holding their hand when they're scared. Choosing, every damn day, to show up. That's what matters. Coleman nodded, swallowing hard. Kevin and Marcus faced prison. But the judge saw something in them, something Jake's testimony helped illuminate. Kevin was given probation and community service at Milbrook Hospital, where he wheeled patients to X-rays and brought blankets to the elderly. Marcus entered a rehabilitation program. Later, he enrolled in community college for social work, determined to steer others away from the road he had taken. Jake kept tabs, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He knew redemption was never a straight line. But it was possible. He was living proof. One crisp autumn evening, Emma sat on the diner counter, Sarah's watch in her hand. "Daddy, do you think Mommy sees us? Like up there?" Jake's throat tightened. He sat beside her, the hum of the diner lights soft above them. "I think she does," he said. "Every laugh, every step forward, every choice we make, she's here. Right here." Emma smiled, slipping the watch onto her wrist. "Then I'll wear it. So she knows I'm carrying her love too." Jake kissed her forehead, a tear slipping free. Milbrook hadn't changed overnight. Prejudice lingered. Gossip never died. But in one small diner, above one small apartment, a father and daughter found peace. Jake no longer thought of himself as an ex-con, or a widower, or a man defined by mistakes. He was just a father. A man making daily choices to show up, to love, to protect. And maybe that was the truest kind of heroism, not walking into a bank unarmed, but choosing, day after day, to be better than yesterday. They say America is a country of second chances, but the truth is, we don't hand those out easy. You've got to bleed for them. You've got to fight for them. And sometimes, you've got to prove you're not the man they say you are. Every small town has a story it tells itself. Milbrook's was simple. We protect our own. But the irony was, they never saw Jake Mitchell as their own. Ex-convict. Widower. Dishwasher. Those labels stuck harder than glue. And for years, the town judged him by what was written on paper, not by the man standing in front of them. But then came that one day. That siren. That scanner call. That choice. And suddenly, the labels didn't fit anymore. People like to talk about heroes as if they're carved in marble, shining, perfect, untouchable. But the truth? Heroes bleed. Heroes doubt. Heroes break under the weight of their own failures. Jake Mitchell wasn't perfect. He had a temper. He made mistakes. He'd been behind bars. But when it mattered, he didn't run. He didn't hide. He didn't wait for someone else to step in. He walked into a bank with nothing but courage in his chest and the memory of his wife in his heart. That's the kind of heroism America often overlooks, the quiet, stubborn kind. The kind that doesn't wear a cape, but an apron. That doesn't stand on a pedestal, but behind a diner counter, serving coffee for $8 an hour. Ryan Coleman found his redemption in a hospital bed, staring at a ceiling tile for hours, realizing he'd wasted half a life drowning his pain in alcohol and bitterness. Marcus and Kevin found theirs in work, hard, unglamorous, humbling work. Jake found his not in the applause of the town, but in the laughter of his daughter upstairs. And maybe that's the lesson. Redemption isn't about the world forgiving you. It's about you forgiving yourself long enough to choose better. America loves stories of comebacks. The fallen star who rises again. The addict who turns into a mentor. The sinner who becomes a saint. But in reality, comebacks aren't grand. They're small. They're messy. They're made of daily grit, paying the rent, making breakfast, showing up to school recitals, staying sober one more day. Jake Mitchell's story wasn't about glory. It was about survival. About the stubborn belief that even in a town that doubted him, even in a country quick to punish and slow to forgive, he could still be a father. And that was enough. One evening, as the sun dipped behind Milbrook's grain silos, Emma asked Jake a question that stopped him cold. Daddy, what makes someone a good man? Jake thought long and hard. Then he answered, It's not the big moments, honey. It's the little ones. The way you treat people when no one's watching. The way you keep going when it'd be easier to quit. The way you love, even when it hurts. Emma smiled, Sarah's watch ticking softly on her wrist. Then you're a good man, Daddy. And Jake, for the first time in years, believed it. Thank you for staying with us through this journey of redemption, courage, and second chances. Stories like Jake's remind us that strength isn't found in perfection, but in resilience. If this story moved you, I ask you to take a moment to support our work, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next story we bring to life. Your engagement helps us grow, reach more people, and continue creating powerful narratives that inspire and challenge. Together, we can build a community that believes in second chances and the quiet heroism of everyday lives. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and I'll see you in the next story.